Welcome to PuckHeads Insider. This is episode 3, season 1. My name is Ed Combs here in South Florida. My co-host Peter South up in Ontario. You still in Canada right now?
Yes, I am, Ed.
Yeah, had a chance to get to any games as of yet?
Yes, actually, I was at 3 games this past weekend. I went down to Bowling Green to see the Falcons take on Adrian College. And then I was fortunate enough to be in Ann Arbor this weekend watching University of Michigan spank Arizona State University all over the ice in both games.
I want to remind folks, if you like our show, please subscribe. Please hit like. And if you have any questions, please send them to us at puckheadsinsider@gmail.com. That's puckheadsinsider@gmail.com. What do you say we dive right into our mailbag? I know you have a question. I have a question. Why don't we start with yours?
Okay. Scott from Michigan wants to know about what our thoughts are on removing the enforcer from the NHL.
Well, that's something that has been slowly happening since you get back into the Probert Koser days and the guys who helped protect the Steve Yzermans, Mario Lemieux, and Wayne Gretzky's of the league. Seeing how fighting is slowly being removed from the game, it's not leaving much hope for enforcers unless you have hands. And there are very few players like that anymore in the league. I'm going to bring up one because of what we're going to be talking about today is the Stanley Cup champion, Tampa Bay Lightning. We have Mark over in Tampa who has a kind of a twofold question for you, Peter. One, it's about Tyler Johnson, and does Tampa no longer want him? And since they put him on waivers, why did nobody pick him up for free?
Well, Ed, that's a very convoluted question with a lot of tentacles to it. Tampa is facing the same problems that the Chicago Blackhawks did after the 2015 season, and that's a cap crunch issues. Tampa's right up against the wall. They have a couple of very important keys to the team, young players, Anthony Cirelli and Mikhail Sergachev, who are both still restricted free agents, who they need to sign. Tampa only has about $2.8 million left in their cap space to sign them. So that was the reason they put Tyler Johnson on waivers, hoping somebody else would pick him up. The reason he wasn't picked up, well, there's many reasons. Probably one is the fact that there are 9 teams out of the 31 teams right now who are over the cap, which we were discussing earlier before the show. And the biggest surprise of them all in that one is Arizona Coyotes are the highest team over the cap, which nobody would generally guess. So a lot of teams right now are looking at their rosters, trying to see where a player like Johnson could fit in, not only on the ice, but in their financial structure, because Tyler is making $5 million a year, which is a good amount of money for a guy who's generally a second or third line center. The other issue is, everybody's waiting to see, teams are waiting to see what's going to happen with the season this year. Are they going to start January 1st? What length is the season going to be? Is it going to be 82 games? Is it going to be 70 games, 60 games? Nobody knows yet. The NHL and NHLPA are still working out all those details. So we're probably not going to know what the plan is until later this month or early in December.
With Tyler Johnson at $5 million a season and he signed through the 24-25 campaign, you've got Sergachev and Cirelli who were basically playing for nothing, who are going to sign for $3, $4, $5 million apiece, probably garnering long-term contracts, which kind of leaves Tyler Johnson on the outside looking in. What does this do for for teams who are way below the cap? Who could take on a Tyler Johnson salary? Is he going to want to go there? What options does he have? Is it teams that are way down the list on teams that are going to contend for anything, let alone a playoff spot?
Well, the New Jersey Devils are a team that are they're at the bottom right now as far as salary cap expenditures, and somebody who can look forward to, having a guy with the caliber of a Tyler Johnson playing. But Johnson, even though he was waived, isn't the only player that Tampa has rumored to have on the block right now. Word has it that Alex Killorn and Yanni Gourde are 2 other players whose names have been mentioned, 2 other teams about possible trade moves to free up some cap space for the Tampa Bay Lightning.
So do you see somebody taking on, I'm going to try to say this the right way. Let's look at the New York Rangers and Detroit Red Wings. The Wings took on Mark Stahl and got a second-round draft pick simply for taking him to get rid of some salary space for the Rangers. Who do you see doing that for Tampa? Maybe getting a draft pick for taking Tyler Johnson off their hands.
I could definitely see a one of those lower level teams, New Jersey, Detroit, even the Panthers taking them and getting, first or a couple of draft picks. Well, actually, they'll give up as little as possible, because what they might do is hang on to a Tyler Johnson or Yanni Gourde or Killorn and use them for next year's expansion draft when Seattle comes into the league, and expose those guys and those salaries they have to Seattle.
With as little space as Tampa has remaining in their salary cap to keep all three of those. I mean, Sergachev and Cirelli, even though they're RFAs, they're going to want contract extensions. They're going to call for bigger money.
That's the issue facing Julian Breezeball right now. And the other wild card in this scenario is Steven Stamkos. Stammer's making $8.5 million this year. He did not participate in the playoffs, albeit the one game in the Stanley Cup Finals. It's come out that he has core muscle issues. And as we were saying, he could be a candidate to go on long-term IR, especially if it's a shorter season this year, which would free up a significant amount of cap space in the short term for the Tampa Bay Lightning.
When you say the shorter season this year, are we looking at starting still in January? Are we looking at a 60-game schedule? Are we looking at a 41-game schedule? How does that affect players' money, and how does that affect Stamkos for his being on the long-term IR? How are the players going to get paid? Is he better off sitting out a shortened season like for next season or even longer?
Well, those are great points, Ed. I think what the NHL is looking at, one of the things Gary Bettman has stressed is he wants to get the NHL back into its proper calendar for the following year, for that 21-22 season. So I can see with them starting in January, them playing like a 48-game schedule or even a 60-game schedule, trying to have the NHL Stanley Cup wrapped up around by the end of July at the latest. What that means to the players is the fact that, are they going to have to take a prorated salary? That was something that was discussed in the collective bargaining agreement the league and the Players Association agreed upon before these last playoffs started in the return to play. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all falls out. My sources say right now the NHLPA and the NHL have yet to start talking about all these particulars. I think the most important thing is, and both sides know this, is to get back on the ice in early January. The structure is going to be interesting simply because of, the borders still aren't open. So are we going to be looking at an all-Canadian division? Are we going to try to play regional games? I heard one scenario where they might try to play like a baseball-type situation. For example, we're talking about Tampa. Tampa would go to, say, Carolina for 5 days and play 3 games there. They'd be locked in their hotel, between the hotel and the rink during those 5 days to keep safe, and then move on either back home or to the next city.
Before we start getting into that part of it, staying with Tampa, you were talking about Yanni Gourde and Alex Killorn and certain players possibly being used as bait for Seattle. Even if they're able to do that, somehow make it through this season under the cap or at the cap, once they start losing players, who do they even got coming from Syracuse? Who do they got coming from Orlando, the Solar Bears? This is their farm teams. Do they have any kind of depth to replenish these guys?
Tampa's depth is very, very limited. Last couple seasons, they've traded off some of their higher picks for players to help them win the Stanley Cup this year. That's not uncommon for teams to do when they feel they're on the cusp of winning it all, to kind of trade away the future and make the future now. I think Tampa organization is looking at it that the crew they have, the players they have now can be successful for at least the next couple of years, maybe win at least another cup. But depth-wise, they have a dire need for quality players in their system. So you could probably see after the next year, a run. If they win the cup, they'll keep going for it. If they don't win the cup next year, then they may be trying to move players, some of their higher-end players, for higher draft picks and start that rebuild again like a lot of teams have done.
All right, now that we know a lot about what's going on with Tampa, let's talk about what's going on actually in the NHL, because there is a whole lot of conversation going on. Gary Bettman has sat down with the NBA, with Major League Baseball, with the NHLPA, talks on how they want to do this. Like you had mentioned earlier, realignment. Do they have all the Canadian teams in a division, all the West Coast teams in a division, all the Southern teams in a division, all the Northeast in a division, so that you've got these teams in their semi-bubble where they go travel to a city and they sit there and play, like you said, a baseball series, 3 or 4 games and move on. Next team comes in, and when you're home for a couple of weeks, and you tell a couple, 3 or 4 teams come in to play you, and they keep everybody kind of on a lockdown while they're in whatever city they're in. What direction do you see this going? Have any idea on a start time and a season length?
Well, as we were talking about earlier, it's all up in the air right now as far as the season length, divisional alignments. I think first and foremost that has to be done is the border situation has to be rectified. The Canada-U.S. border needs to be opened. When you talk regional, I mean, you would hate the fact that Toronto couldn't play Buffalo or Toronto couldn't play Detroit simply because of the border situation. And those teams are, regional combatants. You look at, Vancouver out in the West, San Jose Sharks are a good rivalry with them. Calgary and Colorado. I mean, those are other cross-border rivals that wouldn't take place. And if you look at the idea of a Canadian division, I mean, it sounds romantic to a lot of Canadians, but the logistics of it are kind of wild and crazy, because you'd have Vancouver in the same division as Montreal and Ottawa. And I mean, you're traveling across country. Different regions of Canada still have high rates of COVID. So it isn't necessarily the best solution. But again, because of the borders, it may be the only solution.
With everything going up and up and up right now in COVID, and certain parts of the United States, actual states doing complete shutdowns, has there been talk of canceling the NHL season altogether?
I haven't heard that. I think it's important for the NHL that they don't cancel. They are looking at the NFL, how they've been monitoring things. Even the NCAA hockey has done a great job from what I've seen so far with the like the Big Ten, with the protocols they've put in to keep the players safe and everything like that. But the difference between the NCAA and the NHL is a definite revenue generating business model that needs butts in the seats. And it's really hard to do that with all the spikes in COVID and local governments saying that there is no chance you're putting people in the seats, such as what has just been imposed today in Michigan.
Well, getting to that point before we even get to the shutdowns, yes, the NHL is revenue driven. Yes, the NHL wants fannies in the seats. The NHL can survive on television contracts. Who can't survive is the American Hockey League and the East Coast Hockey Leagues, the Ontario Hockey Leagues, the Canadian Hockey Leagues, the Western Canadian Hockey Leagues. All of these smaller leagues, they rely. They cannot operate without fans in the stands. What happens if the NHL can get started without fans to all of these players? And we're talking thousands of players who cannot play because of their league. It's being shut. There's no fans in the stands. The owners can't operate. You're not in hockey.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult, especially since I heard from Contact and the ECHL, they had 2 teams go dark already. Some of their teams are supposed to start in mid-December and the rest start in mid-January. But I've heard that there still could be a number of those teams who more or less at the last minute are just going to say it's a no-go, and they're not going to be able to do it because their community won't allow spectators in the seats. And opening the doors without spectators at that level and the American Hockey League is just not financially possible.
Okay, so you got Michigan shutting down, going into lockdown already. Illinois, I know Chicago's on shutdown. I'm not sure about the entire state. New York is on lockdown. What is going to happen in the rest of the areas that either have not or are about to, compared to the places who are? Are these guys going to be able to leave where they're at to go play hockey? Can they go to Europe? Can they go wherever, to Canada? Where can they go to continue their craft, to keep playing, because they're not going to be able to play in certain places in the United States?
Well, a number of NHL teams have already loaned some of their younger players, especially their European draft picks, to teams in Finland and Sweden and stuff like that, so they can continue playing right now where those leagues are playing, and COVID isn't running as rampant as it is here in North America. As far as a North American-born player going to Europe, it's rare, although the OHL just had two young boys travel to Sweden to play there. They're on loan until their season starts.
Top 4 or 5 picks in the draft this season are probably all, if even that many, that are going to make it straight to the NHL. The rest of them are probably going to stay wherever it is they are. If they're drafted from Sweden, Finland, Russia, wherever they had, Germany, wherever they happen to be, they're probably just going to stay there. And their AHL affiliates are probably going to be loaning them to wherever they can go to continue to play. If they're not playing, we know the NCAA is going to continue to play. What about the USHL, and what about the Canadian junior teams?
The USHL is playing. They have one team, Des Moines Buccaneers, who are still on lockdown because of COVID, and the U.S. development team, which has canceled games for the last couple of weeks. Their games in the USHL, they're on shutdown as well. Back to the NCAA, like I said earlier, the Big Ten started off this weekend. They had 2 sets of games, with Michigan playing non-conference rival Arizona State. Sideline on that, Arizona State is taking part in the Big Ten this year. Very unique way they're doing it. They're going to play all 7 teams, play them 4 times each, all on the road. So Arizona State's going to play a 28-game schedule against all the Big Ten teams, all on the road. So that's dedication on their part. There's no doubt about that. They
don't get any home games?
No home games at all. The sad part is they just opened a brand new arena down there too. So,
oh my goodness, that's going to be a rough season for them.
It will be, but I think what it does is it puts them in good position to join the Big Ten for next year. Back to the other announcement that's really surprising in NCAA hockey is the Ivy League has decided not to play any games this year at all. And what makes that unique is Yale played the first intercollegiate hockey game against Johns Hopkins on February 1st in 1896.
1896?
They're the only school of the 6 Ivy League teams to have played continuously ever since then, even through World War I and World War II, when other teams took the season off. They had a run of 124 consecutive seasons. That's broken this year because of COVID.
That's too bad. That is too bad. We don't take COVID lightly either. Please understand that. It's just that it is sad. So many things have changed drastically because of it, including sports. Maybe that's a small price to pay in the long run. The U.S. National Development Team, what do we got going on with them? Have they gone dark? Are they playing the 17 and 18-year-olds?
Yeah, both teams, unfortunately, have gone dark. They had a couple of games scheduled this past weekend that they had to cancel. The under-18s even had a game scheduled for this Saturday against Bowling Green University that they pulled the plug on. I guess they have some cases that they have to get under control first. And it's also going to be a wait and see because of the new restrictions in Michigan that is only allowing arenas to have sports in them that are professional arenas. So far, the NCAA teams have got the okay to play, but who knows if that'll be rescinded or not.
College football, some of them are allowing family members to be in the stands. Some baseball games towards the end in the World Series allowed them. Some NFL teams are going against protocol, allowing fans in the stands. Is there any word on what the NHL is going to do in this season?
No, I think they're trying to watch closely what's happening, especially with the NFL. I know in the NCAA this past weekend in Michigan, they allowed 2 tickets per player, and they were strictly for family members. And if family members couldn't use them, those tickets went unused. It was so strange on the weekend to see an announced attendance at Yost Arena, where there's generally over 6,000 packed into there, an attendance of 80.
80 fans at Yost Ice Arena. That's absurd. Mr. Yost is probably rolling over in his grave as we speak. Jumping back.
One side note, Ed, I hate to interrupt. There were a couple of minor tweaks in the Big Ten and the NCAA hockey this year that they put in that are quite interesting. One of them was very significant, is they reduced the time of intermissions from 15 minutes to 12 minutes, which has
in NCAA hockey.
Yep. In the Big Ten, which has really sped up the games. Both games that Michigan and Arizona State played took just over 2 hours to play. Quite amazing. And I'm sure the Big Ten Network and the NBC Sports Network, which carried the Wisconsin and Notre Dame game Friday night, were quite happy about for scheduling.
No kidding. Now, is there talk of doing that in the NHL or any of the other leagues?
I haven't heard that from anywhere else, but okay. It is quite interesting. The only caveat with that is it would have to be done in rinks that have 2 Zambonis. If it's done on 1 Zamboni, the ice just doesn't have enough time to dry, and the players go back.
Most NHL teams have. Most NHL teams have.
Yeah, the NHL is required to have the 2 Zambonis do the ice. But, you get down to some of the other leagues like the ECHL, a lot of those teams that only have the 1 Zamboni to do the ice. So it'd be interesting to see.
All right, let's jump back quick to Tampa before we do run out of time. They do got a lot of things that have to be done. Regardless of that, let's start with the main question. Does Tampa repeat?
I would say they are an odds-on favorite to repeat. They have team depth, but their organizational depth is questionable at best. If they can stay healthy through a run, do the regular season and playoffs, in a perfect world, get their restricted free agents, Cirelli and Sergachev signed, get everything straightened out with Johnson and Killorn and Gord.
What about without Stamkos? What if he ends up on LTIR?
Yep, it's in a perfect world for Tampa as far as the contracts and all that goes. They definitely are an odds-on favorite to win it again.
Do you see Dallas coming back to compete as well, or is it a St. Louis? Is it a Florida now? Who's going to make the biggest jump this offseason into the new season?
I think the teams to watch are definitely going to be. Toronto's going to be making an impact this year for sure.
With getting Jumbo Joe? Joe?
Yeah, Jumbo Joe is going to help as far as mentoring in that locker room. But I just think the younger guys are ready to take it to the next level. Other teams to look at, like you said, Dallas is definitely going to be there. St. Louis, a team with a lot of pride. They're going to make sure they get back on the train, ride it hard through the season and the playoffs. So it'll be interesting.
You got Washington too. Pittsburgh, who was the last one to go back to back. Are they going to be there at the end?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Now that Matt Murray's gone out of Pittsburgh, though, the goaltending could be an issue there.
Florida, where do you see them? I mean, they've done a lot of off-season changes this year as well. Is goaltending going to be there for them? I
think it will be. I think Bobrovsky is going to be nice and settled into the organization. I'm personally a big fan of Joel Quenneville. I think he'll have them playing the style he wants them to play. And I mean, he's a 3-time Stanley Cup winner. You can't take that away from him. The players know he knows how to win.
I'm still shocked over that move of him going there and Saad. How do they get rid of Saad?
Well, that's another one, right?
Right. And when you hear from when you talk to Captain Sirius, Taves says he's never seen this. He never saw Saad leaving, never saw it coming. He was totally shocked. And now that he's in Colorado, does that boost Colorado even more?
Colorado is definitely a team to take. They have a lot of depth. I was kind of surprised they lost out this year. I thought they were going to make their way to the finals. Brandon Saad will definitely be an asset to them. It's funny what you say about Taves being shocked. I remember he was shocked after 2015 when Chicago traded him to Columbus. His contract, he was also one of those restricted free agents. Chicago was more worried that somebody was going to tender an offer to him that they would have no chance in matching. So they looked at Columbus, got the deal they wanted from Columbus, and traded him there. Ended up getting him back and then traded him again. So who knows? Maybe it's in the cards in the future for Brandon Saad to make one more trip back to Chicago.
There you go. And in the end, who do you think has the biggest odds of the Cup? Do you still think it comes down to Tampa?
Well, you know what? It's hard to bet against them right now, especially you look at the goaltending. Vasilevsky has to be the premier goalie in the NHL right now, bar none. And it starts there. They just are that good. And Nikita Kucherov could be the best forward in the NHL right now. Best pure scorer. Braden Point, he has really established himself as a top-notch NHL player. And the great thing about Braden Point, and it's a good message to all our young players who are still aspiring to make it to the NHL. Braden Point was a third-round selection in the 2014 draft, and he's surrounded by two guys who were picked in the second round and fourth round who are still playing for Syracuse.
One of his teammates, Kucherov, he wasn't a top 10 draft pick. He was 58. He was taken in the second round.
Yep.
Stevie knew what he was doing.
Well, yeah, he did. He saw those guys there, and they got the opportunity. And I've always been a big fan of the late bloomers because those are the guys who've seen both sides of it. They've seen the struggles of being a third and fourth liner, and then when they work their way up to become a first liner, they don't want to look in that rearview mirror and go backwards. They keep going forward.
Exactly. Well, I hope everybody's enjoyed the show. If you have, please subscribe. Please click like. And remember, if you've got any questions, please send it off to us. It is puckheadsinsider@gmail.com for Peter South in Windsor, Ontario. My name is Ed Combs here in South Florida. We hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week. Puckheads Insider Report.